Welcome back to the Corporate Culture Protest, where we don't just survive toxic workplaces, we expose them. We are a team committed to calling out the harmful norms that keep so many of us overworked, undervalued, and emotionally drained. I'm Arika, part of this collective voice that challenges corporate systems and advocates for wellness with truth and purpose. Let me hand over to my co-host to say hi.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I look forward to this as always. Thank you.
Hello, good evening, ladies. Thank you for having me. Let's do this.
Okay. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on something that too many of us have experienced, but rarely name. What happens when your leadership lacks empathy? When emotional connection is replaced with corporate catchphrases? When your humanity isn't seen because performance is all that matters? Let's get into it. Let's talk about the cost of cold leadership. What does it feel like to work for someone who doesn't actually care about your well-being? Jenna?
So, from the experiences of doing employee wellness, it's a combination of needs being ignored, dismissed, and invalidated to the point where employees experience burnout and just complete disengagement. So, the first one that is very common is just the lack of recognition and appreciation. In other words, where good is expected and bad is pounced upon. So no positive feedback or ignoring achievements or only addressing mistakes. This, Arika and Dr. Chipo, is very common. That one, just that doing well is
Mm,
a given.
mm,
And then on the empathy side, even more so, is ignoring emotional distress. So not checking in with employees,
mm,
or when you're on sick leave, the other employees or the employer badges you to come back, expecting full productivity without acknowledging your state of mind or your or
mm,
illness that you may be going through. And then, of course, brushing off any signs of anxiety or burnout.
mm,
Then absence of supportive leadership. You may have had some kind of trauma. It could be crime or armed robbery or mugged or something. And it just gets brushed off or difficult conversations get avoided. Um, and then this kind of thing, the other one, Arik, is one that's always been there is leave your issues at home, stay professional, and then everything else doesn't exist. So there's
mhm.
always be professional culture. But the
Yeah.
problem with that is that you're shaming vulnerability as unprofessional. And you're forbidding discussion on mental health, and you're seeing employees as machines essentially. And
Mhm.
so that is why employees need an employee wellness provider and be managers with good EQ and good emotional intelligence. Then what happens is when you do react or when you do say stuff, you get told you're overreacting and they downplay your real concerns as weakness. In other words, as we discussed a couple of weeks ago, this is classic gaslighting. And then last of all, Erica, is just inflexibility during hardships. So denying reasonable requests for time off, expecting high performance during a trauma, and giving guilt trips for prioritizing your family, you know?
Yeah.
And I get the pressures that companies are under. I do get that. But you are dealing with human beings, not machines. And so this is deeply concerning. Yeah.
Yeah, because I
Mm.
actually feel like if the employer takes care of the employees, they wouldn't have to worry so much about their production. They wouldn't have to worry so much about, the outcomes because they taking care of the employee should take care of business.
Exactly. Yeah.
Dr. Chippo.
Mm. No, absolutely. Jenna, you're right. And I think as you started speaking on that, you also even drew my attention on some stuff that I've worked on as well on emotional work, emotional labor. And as you were explaining, like you were explaining that there's this whole idea of you need to leave your emotions at home. When you get here, it's about work, it's about doing whatever you're doing here. You have to manage your emotions in the workplace. You have to manage other people's emotions in the space, in the workspace. But like you're rightfully saying that employees are not machines. We are beings that feel, we are beings that go through everything and all kinds of emotions. Like we literally exist on an emotional roller coaster. So to say that when you come to work, you need to leave your emotions at home doesn't work. But what has then made it worse, or what has made it impossible then for people to function well in the workplace if they lack that support is that whole idea that capitalism has always had at its core the idea or the concept of maximizing on profits, right? It's always been about what the employee can bring to the workplace that is very much supposed to be contributing towards maximizing profits. So you find that there's that lack of understanding, or in most cases, a lack of support structures that help employees to navigate what's happening in the personal life and in the workspace, which is difficult as well because there's no way you can separate the two. You can't have a work persona and a home persona because there's always that idea that everything, it's a mishmash of everything. It all falls into each other. So the workplace you and the home you, there's no way you can separate the two. So you find that in most cases then you end up with people, when they lack that support structure, who come to work, like you're saying, end up being frustrated because if the system is not supporting them, then how then do you regulate yourself and try to show up and work in the same place at the same time? It's very difficult. So I think what we then need to focus on, what companies I feel need to do, is to invest more into creating support structures that work to cater to the needs, emotional needs of the employees. Because like you rightfully said, we're not machines at the end of the day. We are human feeling beings that go through everything. And if then you don't have that support structure in place, it becomes very difficult to navigate and work and try to negotiate the work persona and the home persona, which at the end of the day is very much connected and linked in everything that we do.
And what happens is, just to finish off on that point, is
Mm.
let's say an employee's had 3 bad months with sales or something, or they're not quite at their best. What often happens instinctively, what companies do is they'll then call in that employee and there'll be a threat of a warning or scolding, not a, are you okay? Is there something wrong? This is out of character, or what's going on? You know, do you need some help with it? Are you okay? In other words, the instinct is to say you're not aligning with our spreadsheet. Now we're going to punish you or something, instead of seeing the human first. And that is, as you say, Dr. Chipo, common. Yeah.
And it seems to me as though if someone is doing that to a person where you're not interested in what's going on, you're just interested in the results, that poor person has so much to deal with. And then on top of that, the stress of worrying about being put on a performance review, and their performance may tank more. You know, it's not helping the situation. For me, I struggle to understand why certain toxic cultures don't want to focus on their people, because their people actually bring in the money. So all they have to do is take care of them. It's so simple. I just don't understand why it's not done.
Well, Erica, I mean, there's a guy named Richard Branson. We know who he is, and let's say he's been pretty successful. And he himself says clients do not come first, employees come first. If you take care of your employees, they will take care of the clients. So where did it go wrong? Why has it become like this? Or was it always like this? Yeah.
It's true.
Also, maybe also even to add on, sorry, I could just a second
Sure.
before I lose my chain of thought. I'm also thinking with most institutions as well, even how the workspace is structured is set to alienate individuals. It becomes a very individual type of thing that you are stuck in your tiny cubicle. I know there are some workplaces now, they're encouraging the open what office space where everybody is literally in each other's face. But if you look at how most companies are still structured, it's more of everybody's confined to a tiny cubicle, right? You do your 9 to 5, you're confined in your tiny space. There isn't much interaction with everybody else, which then makes it literally impossible for most people to have those moments where they can even have social interactions while at work. you find that the structuring as well, or the structuring itself, does not encourage that space or environment where it allows for people to have moments where they can exchange or talk about or interact in a way that they have moments where they can discuss whatever is going on with them. So I don't know how best we can navigate around that, but there is that need to move past the culture of this whole confining people to tiny cubicles where it's very individualistic. You are in there from 9 to 5, you get 30 minutes lunch or an hour of lunch, which is honestly not enough time to detox or try to just be out of that space where the stress of the work is with you. So I don't know, maybe it's just me and my thinking, but I think how also even the physical structuring within most of these companies, it's not helping. It's not helping employees, not at all.
Yeah.
In turn, it's not helping the company either. That's what I think, you
True.
know. Anyway, let's talk about what so-called support, when that just is a policy. Why do so many companies say that they care, but people are still burning out in silence? Jenna.
Well, the first one is fear of judgment, because there's still a culture of mental health stigma and a culture of a kind of turf war in organizations. So what happens is that if you are afraid, if you say you went to a therapist or show a vulnerability, then the instinct is my boss won't think I'm strong enough to cope at a higher level. They'll think I won't cut the mustard, or it'll be used against me somehow. So because of that fear of judgment, there's increased suppression, or you continue, there's this continual worry of appearing weak. And this then leads to a kind of almost daily hypervigilance where you always on guard and always checking, and I better let my guard down. And as you can imagine, guys, that's extremely stressful. And of
Yeah.
course, when you have the same, it lead to low self-esteem and feeling less confident for struggling mentally. Because what happens is you start looking around and you start thinking, well, everyone's stronger than me, everyone's tougher. Now you start thinking, I'm less confident. I can't cut the mustard at this place. Um, and so what then happens is that you kind of have this internalized stigma, which starts to damage your self-worth. And then this shame, worst of all, prevents help-seeking behavior. So because you have the shame, because of this culture, you don't seek help, and that's then a concern down the line for things like depression and substance abuse and things like that. And then the lack of support deepens hopelessness. The emotional suppression can result in burnout. And then you have isolation, social withdrawal, or just not connecting with people because you fear being labeled. Naturally, then, as a consequence regarding productivity, there's a decrease and a lack of engagement. You know, then you have difficulties focusing and concentrating, absenteeism rises, and as a result, you fear job loss or demotion, and then there's just this reinforcement of a toxic culture because there's now this norm of silence or denial. And so silence has become, like I say, a norm in the organization. So when it then becomes a norm, anytime you show vulnerability is seen as bad as opposed to human, because it's now become a norm. And when that's the case, I reckon, Dr. Chipo, then you have what you would call a toxic organization. Seriously so. When you can't be human. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's usually with the stigma, it gets people to be silent about things that need to be talked about, to a point where, like you're saying, next thing you probably get shocked when you hear that somebody has been committed to a mental institution, but at work they seemed to be doing okay and they seem to be showing up and performing when they did. I think the most dangerous thing about mental health issues is that it's not a physical ailment that you can see and say somebody broke their leg, so they're limping. And with mental health issues, it's something that is not visible to the naked eye. So much that people might be in the fake it till you make it phase for as long as they can, But then when the burnout happens, like it literally takes you out to a point where then you have situations where then you have incidents where somebody maybe just walks into the workplace with a gun, shoots on everybody, and just things escalate and get out of hand. So when then an organization does not commit time and resources to say we need to have a wellness program that looks into the well-being of our employees to find out how everybody's doing, how do we touch base, when do we organize for a wellness day where we bring in psychologists, we bring in professionals that deal with employees and mental health related issues. If that is not there, then you find a situation where people might end up experiencing the sense of isolation, like you're saying, and there's not that element of there isn't an environment that creates a sense of universality because we all go through a lot of things. And the more we can then create platforms where employees can share and have moments where they talk about what is happening, that's you. When you do that, you have a moment to reflect and see that you're probably not the only one going through whatever it is you're going through. So that builds your confidence to know and understand that you're cared for, you are loved in that environment. But if then the institution or the corporation does not make those resources available for you, then it becomes a one-man show where you think you're the only isolated case and you're the only one going through whatever you're going through, and you end up silencing yourself and not speaking up where you can actually get help. So it becomes very difficult when such resources are not made available. But at the end of the day, the company is prioritizing profit, is prioritizing success and which might then be difficult to attain because if your employees are not at their best and not doing you can never pour from an empty cup. You can't. So if you're not doing well on your own by yourself, mentally, physically, emotionally, there's no way you can show up 100 at your workplace and perform and be the employee of the year 12 months of the year. It's practically impossible.
And
Absolutely, Dr. Chipo. Yeah.
also because, and you're speaking about making the resources available with a lot of companies, they do have the resources where they do have an employee wellness provider, but it's window dressing. So they have it to make it look like they're a caring organization, but really that only gets used where things get so bad that they say, well, we better call on the employee wellness provider to help. Or, but at that stage, a lot of the employees are kind of at a point of no return where they've had enough. And then they get cynical about your being there, saying, oh, you're just here because, the management don't want to look bad, or so they've just brought you in to hear our story, but it's just going to be a one-off. So it's either they don't have the resources, you correct, Dr. Chipo, or they have it, but they don't have the EQ or the know-how to when to use it, or to use it in a preventative manner. It's used only as a kind of passing thought, just to say, look at us, we care about our staff. So
it's a checkbox.
And that is just continuous. Yeah. A chat box. Yeah, absolutely
it's
right.
just a checkbox. And the fact is that a lot of employees in toxic work environments, they do not trust that. So when it comes to providing that service for their staff, the staff doesn't trust it because they think they're going to be victimized. Whatever they say in that counseling session is going to be spoken about, even though it's not. But they feel that way because they can't trust the system. They can't trust the organization. And it's pretty sad.
And the reason, okay, why there is no trust is because you aren't seen or heard or valued as a human being. And there's no ways you can trust people when you have that kind of talk, when there's, as you said in the beginning, an empathy deficit. I like that phrase. When you have that, it's very difficult to get trust. Sure, you might be able to do things well job-wise, like sales or whatever, but that's just chores, that's tasks. But if there are failures of integrity from management, then it makes trust extremely difficult. So you're absolutely right, Erica. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like to talk about some of the signs that we are working with people with empathy deficits. Maybe you can tell us what red flags are we looking for, Jenna?
Well, in terms of empathy deficits of management, it's, as I say, the first one, it's just a lack of emotional intelligence or EQ or checking in with your staff. Um, so it's you there just to do a job and management never check in.
Yeah.
The second one is public humiliation. So often you'll be sitting
Mm,
in your cubicle in your section and management just let rip in front of everyone, in front of you to everyone,
Yeah.
which is, as you can imagine, even to the point of traumatic.
It's devastating.
Um,
mm,
yeah, as said earlier, where organizations where good is expected and bad is pounced upon, so no recognition.
Hmm.
Um,
mm,
not seeing your humanity, or you've had a trauma and they don't check in to say,
mm,
how are you? Are you coping? They just it's just the bottom line. It's just are you ticking the boxes, Then a kind of this culture of fear generally. Um, not being heard, or if I speak out, you get labeled as a troublemaker if you disagree. Um, and then being, like I said, being called when you on sick or you're absent, and then people still call you. That one's
mm,
common. And so
mm,
at this
mm,
stage, then, Erica, there's this low morale, low motivation, and a very common phrase I've heard is, "I just come to work to pay the bills."
Oh, yes.
When it gets to that stage, that's when you know the person is tapping out, or to use a more common phrase now, is this quiet quitting, tapping out and just coming in and doing your job, which means you're not going to have employees going the extra mile and thinking up ideas and creating. It then becomes a docile um, environment with a lack of inspiration,
Yeah. Just
and
fly under the radar type of thing.
just fly under the radar. And then when you're at that stage, that's when you start noticing the employees starts looking for other jobs, or they come and go, or they're not as productive, or they spend more. There's a thing called presenteeism where they're at work but not really at work, so they're there but they bit of time at the water cooler, or
mm,
they're just not as productive.
Hmm.
Um,
mm.
and those are the concerning signs. So, yeah, being visible and seeing this for goodness, nearly a decade now. Very common.
Well, when is it going to change?
Yeah.
We have to change it
No, that's true. I think
because you
it's
get to a
about,
point where,
go ahead, Dr. Chipa.
okay, okay, no, no, I wanted to say you get to a point like Jenna is saying that you silently tap out because there's lack of motivation. There's nothing as discouraging as not being seen or feeling as if you are devalued, you're undervalued, and you're not seen or recognized or appreciated in a workplace. I've a very close case of somebody, a friend of mine, also a lecturer. One time, he was going through the most, he had just lost his wife. And turns out they kept calling and asking when he was going to come back to work. And I'm thinking, this is a
Wow.
time when somebody has gone through such a traumatic thing,
Hmm.
and nobody has the decency to say, we'll allow you time to grieve and be out of work, because surely nobody's expecting somebody to show up in that time when you're still also trying to process what has just happened, such a traumatic event of losing your spouse. The calls kept coming in to say, when are you coming? When are you coming? When are you coming? So for me, I personally got offended because I said to myself, if that had been me, surely I would have quit. Because more than anything, it was a clear case of displaying that you are nothing more than a number. You're just a number. You are just one of the people here. We're not even allowing you the time to grieve. We're not even allowing you or extending the grace to say, you know what, take as much time as you need to process what has happened. But instead, the calls kept coming to a point where it was even bordering on, if you can't come through, then we can find somebody else to take over your classes, and which is very insensitive considering the
Hmm.
circumstances under which somebody was going through. So how then do we just want people to switch off emotionally when they've gone through so much trauma, and you still expect people to show up at their best under those circumstances? Wow.
It's
Okay.
impossible.
Good
It's
luck with that.
impossible to bring your best when that's what you're going through.
You can't. But then it then comes back to this whole point of capitalism in general just expects people to show up as machines. You perform your 9 to 5. There's no need for you to bring your humanity to the workspace. That should be left at home, which is ridiculous to say the least. How it make sense to me that you expect people to just walk in, waltz in like robots and perform at their best when people are going through so much, because we don't stop to exist as human beings that experience everything else, even as we are working beings. Life is happening concurrently. There's no way we can mute one end of life because you are at work, or mute work because you are at home. Everything just flows into each other. So how do we stop, or how do we regulate, or how do we put those boundaries to say you can't be like this and be like this in the workspace, and the expectation is this, and that? It's ridiculous to say the least, but it gets to those very toxic, hostile levels that are not sustainable, that don't make sense, and that cannot be sustained, or cannot then lead to productivity as expected by these companies. It won't work. It will never work. Practically impossible.
Yeah, true. We're going to wrap things up. If your workplace leaves you feeling emotionally invisible, it's not your imagination. Empathy isn't extra, it's essential. Jenna, Dr. Chipo, thank you so much for bringing so much of clarity, so much of fire into the space. It's really appreciated. Next week, we're going to ask a tough but important question. Why do employees stay silent when they're treated unfairly? Because behind every silence is a story and a system that has made speaking up feel unsafe. Until next time, protect your peace, question the culture, and protest with purpose. Thank you so much, guys.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Immortal lyrics is forever will I live, 'cause I just wanna give to nothing left for me. You got to stay alive so you can know this feeling. I do this for my people, been swallowed by the evil. Unleash the frequency, deliver with the potency. Every rhythm reaches to oversee. Power that's creeping wherever can reach. Talking the language of super beings. In the land where the seven lady creeps. Who lives in the cave when the mountains be. Depriving himself for the light and heat. Preferring the metal, creating the beast. For I am the legend like up in the tree. Understanding the language I live from the streets. Serving the vultures and havoc release. Who's they have the purpose to make you a feast. And they know they can do it until you deceased. Cause they cold in the hearts of the darkest of blue. And the same is the art, don't be catching the flu.
Like the masses, not what I'm gonna do in the soul. Cause I am used to fingering my home, but when adversary going strong, sharpening your mind speed, persevere, cause the journey be long. Immortal lyrics is you're forever, they gonna live and go beyond.
My whole life up and immersed in these rhymes. Received as the message that it's a rescue from this world and its lies. And now it's hazardous whenever I at any gathering time. Just to influence folks with fluent flows and hope they rewind. While I internally shine, deep in these words of delight. Out with the goddess at night. Speaking Ghanese, singing the future is long and bright. So after it all we trying, keeping the monster at bay for life. Or at least we trying, cause the darkness refuse the light. Focus us into the fight, I'm ready to leak up the heat of mine. Finished and annihilated like Valen she in the tree of life. Some of it is how I'm hated while they get defeated by the beat inside. Weapon of your own destruction, becoming destructive, not giving you rise. Finding out there's a refilling what you consider moments in front of your eyes. Before I pack up and leave, I tell the generation to hold it tight. Dwellers of the dirty city know they ain't pretty but keep warm at night. Giving it all my power to the last hour, the legacy died.
Like the masses, not what I'm gonna do in the soul. Cause I done missed your finger in my home when after said we going strong. Sharpen your mind, speed, persevere, cause the journey be long. Immortal lyrics, you're forever, they gonna live and go beyond. Immortal lyrics is forever will I live. Cause I just wanna give to nothing left in me. You got to stay alive so you can know this feeling.